pledge
This
allegiance.
conference will now be recorded.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, we have the first. You were telling me something before we got cut off, Mike. What?
Mayor, I was going to ask you that if there is anyone from the public that wants to comment when you deem it appropriate on the agenda item, can we make sure that we get name and address just for the record so that we know who is here and participating or offering any comments to the council in your consideration of the matter, if you wouldn't mind.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Andich, are you going to present the planning and zoning stuff?
I will. Let me get everything loaded up here real quick. All right, perfect. So tonight, the first item on the agenda is a request for conditional use permit C1 2021. This is for an exterior storage conditional use permit request at 1111 4th Avenue Northwest. People probably more commonly know it as the address for Radon, the company that makes the horse blankets and other related items. This particular request is being made by Ivy Brook Parking LLC. They have a purchase agreement on the property, and one of the contingencies is gaining the conditional use permit approval here tonight before they complete that transaction. So to give you a little overview of the area, so I've outlined the Radon property, which is for sale and which the applicant is looking to purchase. The site's outlined in red on the overhead map on the screen there. So I've got the zoning colors overlaid on the air photo, and the purplish pink color is the light industrial district, and you can see the chart industry property adjacent with a lot of exterior storage to the south and to the east. And then if you go east or west of Trunk Highway 21, you can see the yellow dash line is actually city limits, but that is our guided land uses for the land outside the city limits. Then you have Lakers, the future expansion of the industrial park when you head to the west there. And then when you go north, you have 12th Street Northwest kind of bounding the property on the north, and then the Home Field Addition residential development on the north side of 12th Street there. So that kind of gives you an area around the property. So the majority of the land adjacent to the property is I-1 light industrial. So again, the applicant, Ivy Brook Parking, is seeking the conditional use permit for the exterior storage specifically of recreational vehicles, commercial vehicles and equipment, and also boats as well in that category. At this address, which is currently the Radon property, they will keep Radon as a tenant in the building. These exterior storage conditional use permit areas were going to be an addition to that building remaining, and Radon continuing to be operating at the property as well. So there are also 2 billboards in the property. Those will remain on the site and actually would be located in 2 of the exterior storage areas, and they really aren't affected by the exterior storage. So they will remain. And the other thing to note is that no new buildings are proposed on the property at this point, meaning that no public utilities are required to be extended to the property. If you're familiar with this property, it is in city limits, but it does not have city water or city sewer at this point. We had looked at that with the current landowner in the past, and it is extremely cost prohibitive to bring water and sewer to the property, although feasible. Just the cost to do so is very much prohibitive, as there's really no other properties in the immediate area that would benefit by that extension of those utilities at this point. The applicant has a similar facility for parking of commercial vehicles, particularly a lot of semis up on that site in Savage. We'll show a couple of photos of that site here. The applicant purchased that within the last year and has made improvements to that site. I want to point out the look of this site will be different than that one. just pointing it out from a standpoint that this is not their first rodeo in this type of operation, and they are operating one in Savage. And again, exterior storage is a conditional use in the I-1 Light Industrial District. On our January 27th Planning Commission meeting, we did have a public hearing, and formally during the public hearing, we did not have any public comments received, although once the public hearing was wrapped up, we did have Mark Peabody, who actually lives directly to the west of Trunk Highway 21 and west of the site, did offer comments. Specifically, the majority of those comments are about noise from vehicles entering and exiting the site, and then hours of operation. So the Planning Commission considered the commentary from Mr. Peabody, as well as their own internal discussion on a number of aspects of the proposal. They ended up adding 4 new conditions beyond what was listed in the original staff report, which had 10 conditions. So they added 4 additional, and those additional conditions related to screening of the south site. They wanted that screening to go on the halfway point of the middle area, and we'll show a map that'll kind of point out more specifically what we're talking about here. Another limitation on the height of items to not be taller than a semi-truck. And then another condition relating to the idling of vehicles, not to be excessive idling overnight. And then finally, the very north edge of the site closest to the residential neighborhood added an additional condition for only smaller items being stored up at that end of the property, again, because of the adjacent residential homes that are near there. So again, here's another location map of the site, a little more zoomed in. So you have a few different distinct areas. You've got what they call the south storage area, which is south of the radon existing building, the north or the middle storage area, excuse me, and then the north storage area. And we'll get into a little better detail here with another map. So this is kind of the main map that I have up now, specifically that was used for the conditions in the exhibit. The green areas signify a 20-foot wide screening buffer area. So there would be a staggered row of deciduous and evergreen trees with a 6-foot tall fence located behind those treed areas. So you have an area basically in front of along the highway, the south, middle, and north storage areas. Another thing to point out is we have a creek running through the property, and there's a 100-foot wide buffer area on both sides of that creek that cannot be used for exterior storage. And this is not an exact representation, obviously, at this point, but shows that that's kind of off limits. And for the most part, those areas are fully wooded right now, and we'll show that when we look at the pictures in a minute here. Do you want to point out one item that came up at the Planning Commission? So this is actually something the applicant was asked to provide between the Planning Commission meeting and the council meeting tonight, is how the areas would be laid out, and the applicant still has to go through stormwater plan review, both from the city engineer and MnDOT standpoint, but this is kind of a schematic of how it could be laid out. So basically, vehicles would exit or enter onto the site from the highway on the existing driveway. MnDOT will not allow another driveway to the highway, and then basically make a very immediate turn to the left or the right to get to the south or the middle storage areas. And they would basically have a access road right up the middle, and then marked storage parking areas along where they're showing in blue here with the drive aisle down the middle. So the applicant indicated that would be the general layout, drive aisle down the middle, storage on each side. And the one thing the applicant pointed out, and we talked about the Planning Commission meeting, is actually is not that different than what Chart has going on their sites, where you have access aisle, and then you have items parked in kind of an orderly fashion. And those are the spaces that the renters would specifically rent out for where they want to park their items. Regarding the screening, so the one thing that we drew on was past experience, specifically for the screening in the buffer area from the adjacent properties, and Chart in particular. We've kind of gone with this staggered row of plantings and fence included as well. So you have the evergreen trees and deciduous trees kind of intermixed. So this is basically the look that you will have. And obviously this photo is from a few years ago, but if you go out to the chart site now, it's filled in quite nicely, and you can barely see the fence anymore. So the fence provides that immediate screening, and then the trees provide the long-term growth screening. So ultimately, staff and the Planning Commission did recommend approval. And again, that was with the resolution in your packet and the 14 conditions that were listed in the report. And I do have some photos here we'll go into before we move along to council discussion. But this is kind of looking at the south storage area site. You can see how the grade of the storage area is actually much higher than the highway. So you have that natural height difference there, kind of helping hide that south storage area. So they will have their screening on the top of that, so it will provide a very good screen to that portion of the south area. And one thing I do want to point out, the applicant would only improve these sites as they're filling them up. South area is the #1 site to be done, and then they would continue to the middle area. Now, going to the middle area, this is where the one condition was added. The Planning Commission wanted basically from about halfway on the site to the south to have screening planted along that portion of the middle site when the south storage area is done. And the reason for that is if you're driving into town, that screening would provide more of a screen visually to that south area, even though there would be nothing parked in the middle area on, let's say, day one of the improvements being done. So, so that was one of the conditions that was added. You can kind of see the creek area here in the low area. So they really won't get into that area with that buffer, but I just didn't want to point that out, that is off limits for storage for that buffer area. And then moving to the north end of the site here, this is the area that was discussed to be limited in smaller items. You might have boats and smaller campers on this north site area. And the big discussion point on this one as well was the lack of access to that site right now. MnDOT obviously will not allow access to the site from a drive aisle, or a turn lane, I should say. And then off 12th Street, which is on the north side of the site, our ordinance currently does not allow an access to be less than 500 feet from the intersection of Trunk Highway 21 along a property. This site is not 500 feet deep, so they would have to be acknowledged at a future date to have a variance, and they're not asking for that variance at this point. So in effect, that north site is really off limits for any use at this point. So that would be a future discussion to open that up. They would need that access. That is not being requested here tonight. Finally, I think we've got just the air photo oblique view. You can see the creek area, and again, you can see a lot of the treed areas, which is really what covers that buffer and that easement there. So a couple photos of their site up in Savage. Again, we had some discussion of the look of this site up in Savage. Again, this does not have screening like we're requiring at our site, but we did want to point out they simply, the improvements they had made up here in Savage was to make it very orderly, very laid out quite well for typically what you have is up at Savage anyway, you have personal vehicles brought in, the tractor trailers moved out, and the other vehicle left behind for their work day or whatever it might be. And then they actually have outlets to plug in vehicles so they don't have to sit and idle as well. So from that standpoint, functionality would be similar, but the look, again, we are requiring screening, and it's much further removed from the roadway than what they have up in Savage currently. There would be a similar type gravel storage base, I guess you'd call it, throughout the site. And city engineers review and MnDOT's review notes that they have to come up with a stormwater plan and provide that so that there's not any increase in rate and volume of water leaving the site. And that is yet to be completely finished at this point, but certainly will be reviewed by our engineer and MnDOT's engineering staff prior to any work being done on the site. With that, I'll just leave up the last site plan here that was really used as the main exhibit for the purposes of the resolution. And with that, we can turn back to the council. And I do believe we do have the applicant, Trevor, on the call here tonight, if you have any questions for him as well.
This is
Okay.
Meg.
Yeah, go ahead, Maggie.
Okay, thank you. So I have a couple of questions. I noticed that in the memo to the Planning Commission that there was mention about providing a suitable base for the parking of vehicles, but I didn't see anything in the actual resolution or the conditions. So that was the first item. And then the second question that I have really is, will all the vehicles be operational? I mean, we're not going to have essentially vehicles that aren't running, that are just sitting there and rusting out.
Yep, so I'll address your first question, Maggie, regarding the base. So the one condition we did make about the base is that if they use gravel, they have to provide an adequate dust control measure out there. We didn't want to specifically say they had to use that type of aggregate base or whatever it might be. It simply has to meet our engineering standards, and that's one of the conditions that has to meet the requirements of the city engineer. So they could pave it if they wanted to. I doubt that'll be the case just due to cost, but the main thing was that it meets the stormwater requirements that the city engineer will be reviewing for. So
Okay,
dust control is the main concern with that.
Okay, yeah, I saw the protected from the dust, so I just didn't equate that to necessarily what type of a base would be required.
Yep, and then Trevor, did you want to address the operation and how you deal with people that would try to leave vehicles
Sure.
that are non-operable?
Yep, no problem. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a different headphone, so I'm not sure if it's working. But Maggie, yeah, so can address the pavement question pretty much perfectly. We're going to use either a gravel base or a milling base, and it has to get approved by, city engineer, all the relevant parties before we move forward and actually put it on. Just one more point on that. We might use something called millings. It's basically ground up or crushed up asphalt, and that's what we use for most of our Savage Lot, the newly developed areas. And that basically turns hard, just like gravel, and it reduces all the dust, right? So when you drive in it, there's no dust flying up or anything like that. And for the operable vehicles, I require that all in my policies, I require that all customers of mine, they have to have their vehicles running, right? So in case of emergency, fire hazard, they need to move it within a certain period of time if it needs to be moved. So I can't say for sure if all 100-something vehicles in my Savage Lot are running at the moment. Sometimes obviously they don't start or whatnot, but as a condition of parking there, they need to get it running, upon request if they need to move it. So no, there's no vehicles rusting out, and it's not, all vehicles, have to move, if need be.
Great, well, thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
Maggie, I do want to note, we do address that in the city code. You can't simply have non-operable vehicles stored on any property. So
Right, yep, I do know that with our residents.
Yep.
Any other questions from the council?
Ken, I have one real quick. Are we going to require the screening trees and bushes and stuff to be a certain size? Like I'd like to see them the similar size that chart put in, but I don't know if we need to have that in the resolution that they have to be X amount of width or height or whatever. I mean, I'd hate to see
Go ahead, Sean.
something that's going to take 5 years. Yeah.
Yep. So the code requires, and we required for chart, that they have to be a minimum of 6 feet tall at the time of planting for evergreens, and then a 1.5-inch diameter for caliper size on a deciduous tree. And that is what chart went with. Some of them were a little larger on chart, but they took off pretty quick, and that was kind of the reason for the fencing to be that immediate screen. And then they obviously continue to grow from there. So I don't know if I would recommend anything larger. Typically the smaller bald and burlap or even bare root tends to grow better than the larger stock that tend to be a little stunted when you move them. So I would recommend sticking with the requirement of the ordinance, which we've just seen a lot better luck with that, and they just grow at a much better rate. Just our experience with anything from residential trees that are planted to anything around any of these other commercial properties, including chart. They just, smaller seems to do a little better. Obviously it takes, a couple of years to get, substantially growing, but they don't get stunted.
Okay, thank you. And then maybe just for the rest of the council, I know that during the planning commission meeting, we talked about our zoning ordinance doesn't actually have anything about screening in it. And that was kind of brought up, and I'm wondering if we shouldn't be looking at changing that ordinance to put that verbiage in there in case there is a situation where there isn't a conditional use permit or anything that's needed. I think that'd be something good to have against, all future development.
I can give.
I would agree.
I can give my 2 cents on that. So the reason we don't require the full screening along basically the frontage of a commercial property at this point is because there's certain industry you wouldn't want to necessarily hide from that public view. I'm sure you could come up with some specific requirements for, exterior storage adjacent to a highway that we could have performance standards for, and maybe something like something that's more of a customer facing where you wouldn't necessarily want to hide that. So yeah, there's something I'm sure we could come up with there, Sean, maybe particularly just for exterior storage that, every time they need to have that listed as, yes, that's a requirement. Even though they go through the conditional use permit requirements anyway, but we could probably get some specific performance standards in place. And I think we're kind of narrowing in on that a little bit here with chart and then now this request that I think that could be a very easy thing to add to the ordinance.
Okay, thank you.
Bruce?
Go ahead, Bruce. I'm sorry, I didn't see you.
A couple questions. One of which is just kind of a discussion about the conditional use. We have exterior storage and mini storage, self-storage. I guess I've in the past thought about exterior storage as being storage of materials and things that are accessory to the actual principal operation of the business or the building that's on the site. But so I'm not sure. I guess where it comes up in my mind is when I think about hazardous waste, that's normally monitored by the pollution control based on the business that's operating. But in this situation where we have a storage area, I just wondered, how do we manage hazardous waste and things like that being kept on the property? I understand there's going to be a stormwater plan approved, but when there's no principal operating entity, and I'm not sure if it's even a city issue to deal with, but I guess I just bring up the issue about hazardous waste, and certainly the owner could limit that or restrict it, but I'm not sure as a conditional use issue if that's an issue to us or not. Then I have a couple other questions regarding the resolution itself. So Ken, I don't know if you have any comments about hazardous waste, if we need to worry about that.
Well, the main thing to say about hazardous waste specifically would be the most immediate concern would be from stormwater standpoint. And that is obviously something that would meet our stormwater requirements, which ultimately do tie back to MPCA and the runoff requirements. So that would be addressed that way. Did you have specific concern about a particular item that you're worried about, or just general runoff? Or
being in the banking background, I'm just familiar with the destruction of property and property values based on hazardous waste and chart. An operating business has to keep a certain license and regular communication with pollution control. But in a storage area, if somebody drives a semi on it and there's hazardous waste on it and those kind of issues, I don't know if that really is an issue to us or not, or if we're concerned about it. When we talk about
What?
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah, Bruce, sorry for interrupting. I could add a little commentary into the environmental, the waste or hazardous waste, as you call it. When I bought my Savage property, and this might be helpful. When I bought my Savage property back in it was June 2020, so not too long ago, we had to go through a phase one. You know, as you know, the phase one and phase two environmental, studies, phase one specifically. And surprisingly, the Savage property has hosted tractor trailers for, before the city of Savage even existed. That's why it was primarily there, and there was many tractor trailers at the time. So that's why the SBA and our banker wanted us to do in phase one at least. And they did a phase one, and they found they actually approved it. They didn't find any because we were keeping as parking, and it wasn't detrimental to any residents or so. They didn't find anything that would harm or any contaminants that would harm the public or so. Now there might be of course with trucks, maybe older trucks, there might be a little might be like oil drop here, oil drop there, but they didn't find any pools of contaminants that would cause any concern. So that's why the SBA and my banker approved it to move on. And because this is vacant land, and we're gonna have more of a mixture of boats. My Savage property is more semi-truck heavy. This is gonna be more of a mixture of boats, RVs, equipment, and more of a mixture of things. So it's actually gonna be lighter industrial than what I have in Savage. So the phase one that they did at Savage gives me a little more confidence too that there's not gonna be any hazardous material, even though semi trucks were there for many years. And also, as Ken pointed out, the stormwater management system has to have a filtration system and has to be well designed in order for the city engineer to approve it before we put anything on site.
Okay.
Ken, did you have any comments on that? I mean, I guess one of the issues I brought it up is because there's a creek on the property, and that, but the stormwater plan, if that manages that, but
Yes.
if it doesn't need to be an issue, I'm not saying it needs to be an issue.
I would say the stormwater management plan is the immediate concern, and that is addressed with that. Just like with a new Quick Trip gas station or anything like that, it's the same idea that that's trapping the runoff before there's any immediate concern. You have whether it be a stormwater pond or some other kind of retention, passive or active, rain garden or whatever it might be. That is obviously designed to meet that, and I think that will take care of that.
And then the clarification on the exterior storage, and if we're using exterior storage, are we saying then, and I'm not disagreeing with this, that any kind of storage of goods, materials, equipment, manufactured products, anything can be stored in the property then? Not just RV trailers or semi trucks, or so it could be unloading of materials and things?
Yep, so our resolution specifically, Bruce, is specific to these items being stored on there. So would be limited to parking and storage of recreational vehicles, commercial vehicles, boats, and equipment. That is what the limit would be here.
Thank you. And then on the resolution itself, I had a question on the first page, A, the end of the sentence. Exterior storage area which does not place any burden on parks, schools, streets, or other public facilities. I guess I don't agree with the statement. I guess I wouldn't agree that it doesn't place any burden. That's a very absolute term. Obviously, we might have police and fire and other issues. So, and then a clarification on G, is there going to be power to these storage areas, like plug-ins, or it says there will not be any utilities?
So Bruce, to address that, where they're not extending water and sewer, I should have been more specific on that. They will utilize the electric that we've already got there.
Okay. Then I guess I would ask us to consider the resolution just eliminating the last part of that sentence on A. I don't feel that that's accurate.
We could say, I don't know if this would be agreeable to you, Bruce, instead of the word any, would not place significant burden. That
Sure.
work?
Sure.
Good.
Those are the questions, the only comments I had. Thank you.
And this is Maggie. I've got one additional question. It's kind of off of what Bruce, you had mentioned about hazardous waste. Are these, if semis are stored on the property, and specifically the trailers, are those trailers going to be full or empty? And if they're full, do we know the contents?
Sure, Maggie. Yeah, most of the time they're actually empty. Occasionally when they are passing through Minnesota, you know, they may be full. Each trucker is required to have, you know, insurance, you know, on their vehicle, their cargo and whatnot. So I'm personally not liable for that. I do hold a general liability policy for my lot, and you know, we're also in the process of installing, you know, security cameras through Wellington Security at the moment. You know, upgrading the cameras. So we have, you know, different measures in place to kind of protect the cargo, but ultimately the cargo is on, you know, it's I'm not going to be held liable for any of the cargo or the city, or you know, for any liable or personal injury or whatnot.
Okay, but I'm just playing kind of devil's advocate here. What
Sure.
if there was a trailer, a full trailer, and it contains some sort of a hazardous material? I would think and hope, but I'm not in that industry, that that trailer could not be parked unattended. That there would have to be perhaps some statutes or other regulations of it having to be safely stored so that it can't be tampered with. And I mean, that's the only thing. I mean, you know,
I actually asked that question to a couple of my truckers. I'm like, you know, what if there's dangerous material in these trailers? When I first bought the parking lot, I asked the previous owner as well. And by each trucker, you know, typically works with a broker, right? Broker who dispatches them. And, you know, based on the broker's policies, they have their own policies. They're not allowed to leave, you know, those hazardous materials, explosives, you know, anything that could cause public harm in those trailers overnight unattended. You know, if they're passing through, if they're at a truck stop, yes, of course, right? But in terms of parking overnight for long term, they're prohibited from doing that in most cases.
Okay, all right.
I believe they have to identify on the tractor trailer, whatever, you know, if they're hazardous with those
Placards.
on there.
Placards.
Yeah.
Jim, from a PD standpoint, is there anything more that you would be aware of on that?
Just, yeah, that they would have placards on them that indicate what kind of hazardous material they're transporting. In case of an accident or something, that the products on board can be readily identified.
Sure.
And then to the safety thing too, Maggie, I didn't mention this before, but the site will not be fully gated and closed. One of the things the fire department brought up was having access into there with a Knox box if there was a lock.
Right.
And then the other thing, obviously, we'll be looking at with the engineers, make sure that there's plenty of room for a fire truck to get in and out of the site. And based on just the concept sketch, that will be met. And then obviously we'll have that condition again that has to meet all of our requirements. So it will be accessible, and if something should catch fire, we'll be able to get in there and put that out.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Rick here. I got a quick question. Now, Trevor, are you going to be, is there going to be an employee, or are you going to be there, you know, like during business hours, you know, Monday through Friday?
That's a good question. So I live in Prior Lake, you know, on 140th Street. So I'm about 7 minutes away from my Savage lot, and I'll probably be about 22, 23 minutes away from the new Prague lot. I visit my Savage lot every day. I'm there, you know, I take a swing by in the morning, and, you know, if I may run an errand, I also, you know, swing by at night to make sure everything's in order, everything's okay. So I'm pretty much going to do the same as, you know, in New Prague. I'm not going to be there, you know, I'm going to get a designated office in the radon building and a conference room. I'm going to be there very often, but I'm not going to be like on premises, you know, full time during business hours, but I'll always be on call. And, you know, Don, the owner of Radon, he's going to be there, you know, pretty much all the time during business hours. And, you know, there's definitely gonna be activity. So there's not going to be, you know, everybody's gonna have access to me.
Thank you, Trevor.
Okay.
No problem.
No, I have one more question off of, I want to piggyback off of Maggie's. Is there and I don't know how those placards work, Jim, maybe you can speak to this, or Dwayne here in law enforcement as well. Is there, I'm just thinking of like what Maggie was saying, if there was like chlorine or ammonia, or are those designated something that can be put into the air and actually becomes a mist? And then, I mean, those houses, and Ken, maybe you can show where those initial houses are, because you had a map that showed the 300 yards. I mean, I'd hate to see an ammonia leak or something that becomes airborne and then floats over a community. I mean, you've heard of those horror stories before.
Oh yeah.
And I don't know, maybe there's a placard or something that's, it's a A and B that we maybe put in the ordinance that says it cannot be stored there. But yet maybe a C can, or safer chemicals can. I don't know how that works, but I just think maybe we should look at that a little bit more.
Yeah, they have different classes of chemicals. So you could look at that if you wanted to put that in as a stipulation.
What does anybody else think? Because that.
Well, I think.
Trevor, do you when you rent out a space like that and you sign the contract, is it right in the contract that no hazardous material or dangerous material is stored there?
In my policies, yes. Yep. So I have a written policies that I give out to each individual. So yes, you can't, no explosives, no hazardous materials, no oil on the ground, no, sometimes you have the oil bottles you put in your truck, nothing, no refuse, no garbage, no dumping. So yeah, I'm pretty strict on dumping rules, garbage, any danger.
I suppose a condition could be added, number 15, of simply no hazardous material storage.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'll be fine with that.
I think we have to define that though, because that's a pretty broad category, and I think we need to have some parameters, because what's considered hazardous to one person may not be to another. I like the idea of the different classes of hazardous material that I think already exist. I think Jim, you had mentioned that. So maybe we could work within what already has been categorized. So if it's a class 1 or 2 or 3 or A, B, and C, whatever, that we wouldn't want the highest class of hazardous materials. And to your point, if it's chlorine or ammonia, right? Because we're an agricultural community, there's a lot of ammonia that's used out in the farm fields. And I don't think that's necessarily driven by tractor trailers, or if that's more of a rail issue. But to your point, I think we should probably limit some of the more hazardous.
I'd be okay with that. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Okay. All right. Anybody else on the council want to speak? Otherwise, I'll ask and see if there's anybody. We have some public that signed in here that wants to speak. Is there anybody from the public that wants to talk to this issue? Hearing none. Do you want to come back with a updated resolution for the next meeting, or are you comfortable with voting on this resolution with the stuff we talked about? Or I guess it'd be nice to update it with the language of the hazardous materials, in my opinion.
Well, you know what, Dwayne and Jim, isn't in the driver's manual, when I remember when I did my hazmat, there was actually categories, so if it was like a class A chemical or a class B chemical or a class C chemical, isn't there a listing like that somewhere, so we could say, add right to the resolution, nothing A class, you know what I'm saying?
There is, but the list is pretty big.
Extensive, I understand. Maybe no explosives, no gases, or what?
Here is our emergency response hazard response booklet. We can take a look at this and include some of those in there. I'm from the council's comments, I'm hearing that you guys would want to include anything that could become a public risk if released.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
So we can look through and pick out those classifications that would cause a public health concern if released.
Trevor, are you okay with coming back with this then? Or Ken, how you want to do that? Can we do it right now?
Prefer to do it now if we could, but that's up to Ken and, you know, you guys.
I think it's up to the council. I don't know how specific do you want to get here? Jim, do you think it's going to be a lengthy list or?
Well,
Other classifications we could put?
I would stay away from listing any chemicals and just including explosives, flammable gases or liquids, radioactive materials, corrosive substances. I mean, we can list general categories that would pose a risk.
Well, then I think, would the council be agreeable to those items you just listed there? No hazardous material storage for explosives. Sorry, Jim, you mentioned a few other ones. Could that make up that?
Gases, flammable liquids, flammable solids, oxidizing substances and organic peroxides, radioactive materials, corrosive substances would be just a short list of the different classes.
I would be good with that. How about you, Maggie?
Well, I don't know what the other classes are, so, you know, all of those sound good to me, but I don't know what others might be.
There's 1 through 9, and then the 9th one is miscellaneous hazard materials, dangerous goods and articles.
Can we have Fire Chief Rinda maybe look at the list too? And obviously it's going to follow up. You know, his guys are going to be the ones that are going to show up to combat anything, and he might have some feelings on it too. So I think, Jim, I would be okay with it if you and Steve could get together and come up with language or a list or a category.
Okay.
But I think we should run it by the fire chief.
Sure. I can make contact with him and have a meeting.
So Sean, are you saying that we move forward with the resolution as amended?
Pending a list from the chief of police and the fire chief, yes.
Okay, yeah, I would be fine with that too. I certainly don't want to hold Trevor, you up on moving forward with your other items that you've got to take off of your checklist to be able to get your business up and running.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Okay, does somebody want to offer the resolution with those amendments or those changes?
I'll make a motion to approve resolution number C1 2021 as amended to list the hazardous materials that cannot be stored on the property.
And I think Bruce had another
Well, the
is
changed
that going to
item,
get changed also?
the changed
It
item,
was yes, in the wording of the resolution, it would be item A on page 1, where we would change in the last sentence the word any to significant.
Is that okay with you, Bruce?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Is there a second on this resolution?
Second, Bruce.
Bruce made a second. Is there any other discussion?
Mayor, if I could ask just for clarification for purposes on Maggie's motion, is that she's moving to approve the resolution as amended by adding a number 15 pertaining to hazardous materials to be defined by the police chief and the fire chief for inclusion in the CUP, along with the change to that item in A on page 1. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
That's correct.
That's correct.
So we have a first, and what, Bruce, you made a second?
Yep,
Yes.
so so any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye, and I'll start with Bruce tonight.
Aye.
Sean,
Aye.
Rick,
Aye.
and Maggie,
Aye.
and Jurek votes aye. Okay,
Good luck, Trevor.
good luck,
Thanks so much,
Trevor.
guys. I appreciate it. Appreciate all the time you put into this.
I overlooked something that got pointed out to me. When the computer went down, I forgot to ask for a motion to approve the agenda and I jumped right into it. So with
So
that,
moved.
there's a motion. Is there a second to approve the
agenda.
rest of the agenda as presented?
I'll second. This is Maggie.
Okay, so Rick made a motion to approve the agenda. Maggie made a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Bruce,
Aye.
Sean,
Aye.
Rick,
Aye.
Maggie,
Aye.
and Jurek votes aye. I apologize for that.
That would be a rookie mistake.
Yeah, well. Okay, Ken, you're still on.
Yeah, so we'll get into the planning department reports here. So I'll kind of jump between these three different reports a little bit, items A through C under this item. So we have the summary of growth statistics, which is basically our building permit stats for the 2020 year. The second item is the annual commercial building audit, which is really just a snapshot in time view from early January on what businesses we have in town and actually some of the surrounding area as well, and work with the Chamber of Commerce to make that as accurate as possible. And then the final item is the vacant lot inventory. So with that, I wanted to start with the permit stats for the year, and some of this can get a little dry, so I'm not going to go through everything in great detail, but you can take a look at the summary page here that I've got in the overhead. But in a nutshell, we'll jump to the graphs here for a little better visual, particularly for those watching at home as well. But we had a very good year for single family home construction. And this is not including townhomes, this graph. This is just single family homes. So we were up from 21 single family homes in 2019 to 38 in 2020. You can see back to the year 2017, we had our highest total since the economy kind of crashed in the late 2000 into early 2010s. So you can see we've been up and then down a little bit, but we had quite a rebound here in 2020 with COVID going on and all that. I think it was great news, and we certainly were not twiddling our thumbs. We had a very busy year as far as new home construction, and we've actually started out 2021 here with 4 new home permits issued right out the gate as well. So we're starting right back into it. Kind of jump down a little bit further here. The value of the homes is another thing to point out, and we'll kind of talk about how this compares to our tax capacity here kind of at the end of all this. But so the 17 additional homes from 19 to 20, our average construction value only jumped 475 per home, but you know, we had 17 more homes, so value obviously reflects that here. We'll move over to, well, here's a 15-year look at our single family homes. So, you know, we're up and down from year to year, but sometimes we get permits pulled late in the year or early in the next year, that type of thing. But we've been in that, you know, 20 to 30 range pretty much every year from, you know, 2012 on average. So pretty steady. And then the value again, you know, we've been pretty steady throughout. 2017 was the one blip, I guess, of a little higher value. Townhomes, this is where we went for like I think a period of about 10 to 12 years where we didn't have any townhome construction. And then we had a number built in Raven Stream. And then 2017, we saw the Eastland development come on. kind of south of Colborne's in that area. And then we've actually run through the majority of those townhome lots now, south of Colborne's in that Eastland Preserve, they call it. And there's still a demand for those units. We just don't have too many of those lots left, but you can see how that's kind of waned a little bit, but still part of our overall picture of new home construction in town here. And then there's the townhome permits. You can see that gap where we didn't really have any built for a number of years. So meeting that need, and I won't get into the whole Scott County housing study we had, but there was a demand there, and you can see the market provided those and the developers provided those, and they were built. Then the value obviously, again, corresponds to how many were constructed. So not unusual by any means. Then the overall housing units, this is kind of the number we report for new housing units that don't include apartments. So we had 43 for the year. And you can kind of see how that compares as single family and townhomes. And then the value. We get a little detailed here, so I'm just going to jump through them a little bit. But again, you see we've been down and then back up and then down and back up again. And the value for those. Want to move ahead to commercial here for everybody a little bit. So bear with me as I skip through some miscellaneous permits. So commercial industrial. So you can see it looks like we're on this downward slide. That's simply the number of permits that we're looking at there. So what's more important is the value of those permits. So if you take a look at this graph, we've continued to increase our commercial industrial permit value from year to year here. And particularly in 2020, the bigger projects were the Hy-Vee fast and fresh remodel, the Hy-Vee basically gutting and adding on to that former Shopko store for that project, which won't open until June of 2021. And then you have the new Quick Trip. Again, these are just a few of the projects that made up the total of a very good year, over 14 million in value for commercial and industrial permits here in town. And again, you can see we've always pretty been very consistent on the number of permits, but that value is really what changes, and that value is the important part of the equation. And how much value are we adding to our tax base? And you can see back to 2012, we had the chart project. And then the past couple of years, we've had, Quick Trip. And another one I should mention, we had a daycare addition at Members Milestones Daycare as part of that 14 million in valuation. So again, a very good year for residential and commercial industrial. So just a busy year all around. And with COVID going on, couldn't be happier than what we had going on. Great year for construction. Public permits, these are hospitals, church projects, school projects, that type of thing. And again, we're always pretty even from year to year on what we have for those. And these are anything from a roof on a school, might be a boiler or a furnace at a public building, that type of thing. And again, these values aren't so important because we don't have tax value for these, but we still do record the value. So what made up the total this year in particular was some projects of a more minor scale, remodeling at the Mayo Hospital, a new picnic shelter at one of our parks, Heritage Park in particular, and then in addition to Holy Trinity Lutheran Church as well. So it just kind of shows some of the value there and how that made up those projects. And then back again, public permits, kind of up, kind of down, but generally speaking, from year to year, we get the same general number overall over the past number of years. Again, the value is what really varies, but again, we don't get tax value off of those by any means. And so one other item I talked to Mike about adding in here to kind of show how these permit stats really translate into our taxes and our ultimate data for our, scoot down here, our net tax capacity. So this shows you our breakdown of our city tax base. We have about 71% of our property value in residential, about 7% in apartments, and then 20% in commercial industrial. And that's remained pretty steady throughout. That actually matches with what we've had historically for our land use makeup, what we have in our comprehensive plan. So we've just continued to maintain that. It would be nice, you know, we have the industrial park, we can get those lots filled up, the other 80 acres north Indian Industrial Park filled up, you know, we might see that commercial industrial percentage go up a little bit. And that would be the goal, obviously, to help bring down taxes for the residential side of things. But if you look back in the graph here, you know, starting with kind of our low point of 2013, we've grown year over year our taxable net tax capacity, you know, from 2013 on up to the 2021 estimated here. From last year, or 2020 to 2021, it's about up 7.8%. And then over the 5-year, that's a 36% increase, or about 7.2% annually. So that gives you an idea of how that value on the construction translates into our net tax capacity. So kind of a nice way to tie that all together. And again, we want to keep this moving up and moving forward and keep those values increasing. So that kind of concludes the permit stats. If anybody has questions on the permit report, otherwise I'll jump into the business inventory and the vacant lot inventory. Okay, I'll just skip ahead here. So our commercial or business inventory, I should say, typically this is more of a hands-on and walk into businesses and see what's going on up and down Main Street and Industrial Park and everywhere. But with COVID and particularly the time frame we were doing this year, we weren't really allowed to do as much of that as we normally would. But I worked with Brooke, and I noticed I spelled Brooke's name wrong on the memo, so I apologize to her on that. But Brooke and I reviewed this in from their records, and we obviously look at our utility records and changes that we have in our system, and we keep a monthly report going for the EDA. And, you know, we always miss a few things throughout the year, but we do this once a year to keep a final tally on it. And again, you know, there's different things in here that are always changing. So this is a snapshot in time back on January 13th when Brooke and I went through the list and kind of finalized it. So I had a very good year. Again, we had 13 new business openings in New Prague. These are new companies, new business entities that were not in New Prague the year prior. Back in 2019, we had 12. So we were +1 on the new business openings. We had 32 business closings and or changes. I don't break those up because a lot of times we have just one business moving from one location downtown to another, or maybe they had a building construction renovation project, that type of thing. That would show up as a change on the list, but name change, could be just a location change, that type of thing. So we had 32 of those over the past year as compared to 25 the year prior. So a little more activity on that end. But really the most important part is how do the vacancies look throughout town? And we're actually down 3 vacancies throughout 2020. Only have 33 vacancies. This includes some lots and some commercial spaces, but we actually have 3 less than we had last year. So that's a positive overall. And you got to kind of look for them. You know, for the most part, there's not that much vacant, not like big stretches of downtown that are, you know, empty buildings or anything by any means. Typically things fill up pretty quickly. And one reason we keep track of this so closely is we have people often call looking for spaces, and we use this listing, both myself and the chamber, throughout the year by saying, hey, you know, we did this inventory in January. We know that this space is vacant. Why don't you take a look at that? Contact, you know, whoever the landlord or owner might be, and try to get those paired up so we keep things filled up as much as we can. So new businesses we had here was the Hy-Vee Fast and Fresh that basically took over for the Speedway. That really wasn't closed. It just simply was closed to remodel and then opened back up as soon as they could. Southwest Eye Care went in a former vacant space from Edina Eye that had closed about a year prior. The Quick Trip East went on a previously basically undeveloped piece of property. Main Street Massage was in a space downtown that was occupied by another business previously. And then Nick Slavic Painting and Restoration took an underutilized commercial property along Highway 21 in our B3 district and has been making improvements and obviously adding value to that site. So some of the other notable changes was, Hy-Vee being under construction at the former Shopco. The mill site was purchased by New Prague Mill LLC. We don't know what that will ultimately turn into there, but it's a change in ownership. Another change that wasn't outward, but the MVE Biological Solutions, which is a former, what a lot of people call the AI building at Chart, is under new ownership as of mid-late 2020. And just to point out that that's not Chart that owns that entity anymore. It's a completely new entity called Cryoport. So that was a change, and they're looking at possible expansion or other upgrades to that building. So we might see some change there. CVF Racing is a business in town in the industrial park that's continued to expand in their building and has made great strides in expanding and adding employees and things like that that you maybe don't outwardly hear about or see. And then just one closing, I wanted to note specifically on here, the Edina Realty local office closed. A lot of those realtors did end up going to work for Remax, but that building is vacant and we'll try to get people paired up and occupying that building as soon as we can. So very useful information that we go through this work to do this, but it really helps pair up vacant spaces with potential clients. And I'm not going to go through the whole list here, but you can see anything I highlighted was a change from the year prior. And again, I got to really thank Brooke and the chamber for their work in reviewing this as well, particularly this year in helping go through that annual update. So that's kind of that listing for everybody. And the other part that we do when we do the business update is the vacant lot inventory. So first map here, residential lots, and we kind of update this about quarterly throughout the year. A lot of the developers like to keep track of what's available as they kind of think, where are they going to develop next, that type of thing. So we're down to 64 lots. And that's, at the pace we've been going, just over a year and a half, maybe two, depending on how many we have built in any year. But these are kind of the lots that maybe aren't as desired. We have a scattering throughout town, but the highest concentrations that we have remaining are really Tukalski Acres and Homefield at this point. We have, I'm not at liberty to publicly really announce some local developers looking at opening up some new lots here, hopefully in 2021. But those would be single family from what we're hearing at this point. So I don't believe we'll run out or anything like that. The developers that are local know what we have and in discussion throughout the year with them on that. So we'll be working towards hopefully some plats in the next month or two and open up some more additional lot inventory to add to what we have currently. This is common throughout the county as well, that inventories are getting low and what does open up typically will be built on fairly soon. So just kind of point that out that, we're not about to run out, but, we're getting down there, but we do have other things in the pipeline that we should be seeing shortly here in 2021. So that was residential lots. Commercial lots, we have basically the same inventory that we had last year. The one new lot on the inventory, it was a lot just south of the West Quick Trip that is for sale and could be redeveloped for any number of commercial things, but that was new on the inventory. And we did take one lot off. That was actually the lot directly south of the former Shopco, which Hy-Vee bought. And it was openly for sale and is using it for their addition. So still about 21 acres available for commercial land. So I think we're in a good shape there. And then industrial, our industrial park lots, we still got 7 out of our industrial park lots. We're continually providing information to people that are seeking potential sites for industrial development out there. And then, you know, the only other additional lot is the lot directly north of the fire station. Randy Kubish actually owns that. So that shows up in the inventory as well. And then the 80 acres north of the industrial park, which is on the market and could be developed, but we kind of keep that in our back pocket for larger industrial type developments. And the Moxa family understands that we would pass along their contact information. I think Pat Sullivan's actually marketing it right now, but we'll continue to keep that out there and keep those prospects open for any future industrial development. So again, busy year in 2020, and 2021 is already starting off pretty busy again. So we'll keep the ball rolling, and I expect another good year in 2021.
Thanks, Ken. That's great information.
Thank you.
Very interesting. Anybody else have any questions for Ken? Otherwise, we'll move on to item number 3 of the agenda. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. As I indicated in my memo, I believe, Mayor, you were approached by Mayor Briggs of Prior Lake seeking the adoption of an updated resolution that our city council had previously adopted. I included that in the packet, and that was a resolution that was adopted back on March 4th in 2019 on the matter. Mayor Briggs is basically asking all of the cities in the county to update their support so that they can go through discussions, because in many cases there's been a number of changes with elected officials. And so he was wanting to make sure that all of the cities were still technically on board and willing to be supportive. I probably would turn to Ken and let him talk about the intricacies of what's being asked for, because it was his memo back in 2019 and discussion with the council based on that from a development standpoint as to what it is we're really supporting with this resolution and what we're going on record of supporting Prior Lake and the others as it relates to legislation that hopefully someday will authorize infrastructure development fees that, Ken, why don't I turn it back to you and kind of let you cover the topic and what changed and what's caused this issue to be looked at.
Yeah, so as Mike said, back in 2019 is when we initially brought this forward, but what really made the discussion come to the forefront was the lawsuit. It was Harstead versus the city of Woodbury. And basically what the Supreme Court determined in that case was that cities could not provide this infrastructure development fee for a development to charge more area-wide development type fees, and specifically related to street infrastructure in the case of that lawsuit. We do not have just a blanket fee that we apply. I think they had some particular per acre fee or something to that effect that would fund street improvements citywide. We don't particularly have that, but this lawsuit did affect our ability to charge fees for even transportation related. And the best example I can give you is for the whole Prague Estates development, kind of, you know, south of Main Street, along 10th Avenue there over to kind of the Coburn's neighborhood on South to 29. Is we had fees for basically helping pay for the infrastructure of the traffic signal at 10th and Main, and then actually even partly the roundabout at Chalupski and Main. And we collected development fees through those development agreements for all of the phases of Prague Estates. And this lawsuit says, no, you can't really charge that because they weren't particular to that particular development, even though it was related, you know, causing more traffic to go in there. This lawsuit says, nope, you can't do that. So that's what we're trying to fight, to keep back in our ability to charge is really these street fees, so to say, where, you know, there is a nexus, there's a tie to that fee to the development that that is causing the need for that. And we already have the ability to do sewer fees, water fees, but this particular development or street fee is what was challenged in the Supreme Court. So that's really what we're trying to go for, is saying, hey, if it's fair for us to charge these developers for what their developments are causing for a strain on our street infrastructure, we should be able to collect those fees as long as it's has a direct proportional relation to what they're proposing. You know, I don't want to just charge $2,000 per lot just arbitrarily. No, we want to have a tie back to specific need and specific improvement, but that's what we're not able to do right now because of this lawsuit. In a nutshell, that's what we're all trying to gain back in the statute, and it would help all of us out, because if we don't get these fees approved, you know, it might come that a development would come forward and the general taxpayer would be on the bill for these growth related street fees, and that's not really the right thing to do. It's caused by the developer. So hopefully that provides enough of a background for you on what this support that Prior Lake is trying to spearhead to get changed at the legislative level.
Okay.
Ken, do you
Any
have any
que-
more examples that you could provide in the community that are likely to occur? And part of it is, I think, over on the east side of the community at some point going north, what is it, Alton Avenue, is the kind of roadway improvement that, although there is some cost benefit to the adjacent lands that would connect out onto Alton Avenue, is that the city is going to have to design that in such a fashion that it's not just a small street that's applicable to a particular development, but you're going to have a roadway improvement that's really having to be designed, ultimately looking at the complete build out of all of that area that is likely to use that improvement. And so the challenge becomes is, are you able to come up with some mechanism that provides for contributions being made by the different developments as they connect up and hook into that? Because in the alternative, as you just prior mentioned, is either the local taxpayers would have to pick up that difference in cost, or two, you might not have any development at all if you can't find a way to pay for it, because there's a huge discrepancy in trying to have to increase taxes to pay for expanded roadway improvements that are really being development driven. And that's probably the best example that I can think of is someday the build out of Alton Avenue between Highway 19 going north and connecting into County Road 15 at some point. There's provisions for the county to participate, and you know, we're going to have to play a role, but we're really going to have to look at that as to how do we pay for what is specific and above what's generally needed for the adjacent development. And you start getting into some of those larger tracts that are directly not adjacent to the roadway, but are located to the west of the roadway improvement. How do you bring those in, or any of those lands on the east side of that? They're all going to be able to increase in value and have more potential uses. If the roadway improvement goes in and utilities go in, you've just made a lot of that property much more developable than it currently is at the present time, is just vacant land. So Prior Lake is, we've modeled it, it's pretty much the same resolution that you previously adopted. It's just more current and up to date is all it is.
Any questions?
No, I'll make the motion to approve the resolution supporting legislative authorizing infrastructure development fees.
Hey, Rick made the motion. Is there a second?
Is Bruce second?
Okay, Bruce made a second. Any other questions? If not, Bruce, how do you vote?
Aye.
Bruce
Aye.
votes aye. Sean?
You're muted, Sean.
I vote aye.
Okay. Rick?
Aye.
Maggie?
Aye.
And Jurek votes aye. Interesting. Okay, so now we have number 4, resolution amending the City of New Prague's 2020 general fund and EDA budgets. Who wants to take that?
I'll take that, Mayor.
Okay, go ahead, Patty.
Okay. So due to the CARES Act funds that were distributed to the city in the amount of $606,941, and then there was also a small election CARES fund of $2,792, there's a need to amend the 2020 budget to allow for the revenue, and then in turn a few expenses that the council had approved because of the excess money provided by the CARES Act funding. I listed below the 2 revenue funds that we actually had set up. The first one was the COVID-19 election fund, where it went from 0 budgeted to $2,792. And then the COVID-19 relief funds, where there was a 0 budget to $392,941. Then I also listed the expense amendments totaling $222,483, and just briefly went through the technology. We increased that by $140,400, which was the general fund's share of the new computers and software. Elections increased by $2,792 for COVID-related items dealing with the primary and the general election. Government building increase by $32,455, and that was for the purchase of a new phone system that cost $28,221 and an air quality test of $4,234. Police increased by $18,308, which was for the purchase of squad car dash cameras. The fire increased by $4,864 for the purchase of supplies and dealing with hazardous conditions. And then unallocated transfer out increased by $23,664, transferring to the electric department $3,405 for PPE and barriers, and the golf course for $20,259 for PPE, barriers, and golf cart expense due to social distancing. Based on the proposed budget amendments, the 2020 adopted revenue budget of $5,087,117 would be amended to $5,482,850, and the adopted 2020 expense budget of $5,087,117 would be amended to $5,309,601. Also then for the 2020 EDA budget, the COVID relief funds increased by $214,000, and that was authorized by the council from the original $606,941 CARES Act funds to be distributed to small businesses due to COVID-19. And then the expenses, again, were by $200,000 in special projects for the 27 checks that were issued to small businesses during the COVID pandemic, and professional services of $14,000 for next stage to administer the rules and regulations that they would pertain to the use of those funds. Based on the proposed budget amendments above, the 2020 adopted revenue budget of $50,100 would be amended to $264,100, and the adopted 2020 expense budget of $50,100 would be amended to $264,100. Does anybody have any questions?
No, it makes sense to me.
There was a lot of discussion about the use of those funds, so
I bet
Yes.
there was.
seeing it all listed here, it looks pretty good.
Okay.
So I'll make a motion to adopt the resolutions as they pertain to the amendments to the City of New Prague's 2020 General Fund and the EDA budgets.
I'll second.
And that was Sean that seconded.
That's correct.
Any other discussions? Any other discussion? Hearing none. Bruce, how do you vote?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
Rick?
Aye.
Maggie?
Aye.
And Jurek votes aye. Thank you, Patty.
Thank you.
Thank you, Patty.
Okay, next up is Bruce, I guess, to talk about Utility Commission space needs and financing updates.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is just a point of information for the council, just to let you kind of know on what the Utilities Commission and utility staff have been working on here. Really on a project that kind of started back in 2016. We realized that there was a need for more space for the water and electric departments, especially the electric or water department really had no space of its own, and equipment and staff were kind of shuffled around wherever we could find a space for them. And now the electric staff and the electric equipment space needs have increased a lot too. I mean, that was kind of the topic of tonight is our growth, and we're seeing that on the utility side too, a lot of growth, and I guess it's a good problem to have. But in dealing with that this summer, it's been a topic for the commission. I've been kind of bringing it up that we needed to address this, and back in September, the commission authorized us to hire a consultant to do a space needs study. And in doing so, we hired SEH to produce a study for us and to give us some options to move forward here and to find solutions that would solve our space needs and personnel working areas for the next 15 to 20 years is really what the scope of it was. And so we went down that path, and I'm going to share with you quickly. Hopefully you had a chance just to go through the documents that I shared with you. I pulled out a few of the pages out of the space needs study. But ultimately, this is the building here, if you're looking at your screen, that we currently occupy down there by Chart Industries. And it's primarily used for the electric department right now, but we also have a few of the water department in there. And as you can see, it's full, and we don't even have quite all our vehicles in or equipment in there and during this picture. So as you can see, we're kind of busting at the seams, so to speak. The study really what it did is it encompassed working with the staff and to come up with what really our needs are, and also looking into the future to what our needs could be going into the future. We went through what all of the equipment and all of the departments and what we foresee as the needed space going into the future. And ultimately it come down to that they think we should have around 22,000 square feet or so of space to use not only now, but would suffice for the next 15 to 20 years. Ultimately, it came down to they gave us more or less, working with staff and the commission and everybody, we really came up with two solutions to the problem. One being a building addition at that current location. The red area here is our current building site, and that is about 8,000 square feet. And then a proposed addition here of about 13,700 square feet to give us a total then of about 22,000 square feet on that building site down there. And the second option was to, oh, and this is just a kind of a layout, a little bit of an equipment layout, proposed layouts. Obviously, it gives a staff break room and then also locker room areas for the staff to work in and a lunchroom, that type of thing. So we make sure that we're making a building that's can be utilized by all of the staff and to hopefully cause our workflow to work a little more efficient. That building addition came with a forecasted cost of about $2.8 to $3 million is what we're thinking to do a building addition at that current location at about $209 per square foot. The second option was to do a new building at a location in the industrial park. We were kind of thinking that we would use the two least desirable lots, which would be the far west end of the industrial park off of 6th Street. So we knew that site was going to require a lot of dirt work to prepare those lots. There's quite a bit of a fall to the northwest corner of those lots, but nonetheless, we thought that might be a good spot for a city to utilize those lots, and if we were to go that route. And then we kind of list out some of the features here of a building. We've kind of proposed a 26,000 square foot building with some drive-through bays, meeting rooms, increased part storage is which we're really in need of, parts and truck storage. And then obviously we would have a little bit bigger area for a laydown area for, if that be for poles or transformers or underground cabinets, that type of thing. Again, just another picture of a proposed layout inside of that building and how those spaces would be utilized. And then a small office area off to the one end, and then our part storage. Again, we listed out a bunch of advantages and or disadvantages for building a new building. And we worked through that with staff, with our consultant, and ultimately with the commission at a couple of our different meetings. Again, they gave us estimated cost if we were to build it at a new site. And again, the cost starts to really build up when you got to start from scratch. When you have to get all that land ready and land procurement, and site development was pretty high here for this one. And but again, it would be a new building and would serve our purposes very well. We kind of did what they proposed as a time frame. Should we build a new building? And this kind of just lays out our schedules as we're working through them here. Ultimately, we had to kind of decide what we wanted to do, and I worked a lot with a consultant and working with my staff, and we laid out that building down there, physically marked it out on the ground, and of course I worked with Patty and our financial people just to determine where our comfort was in regards to the monies that we would have to spend to do something. And ultimately, I think it came down to Kenny Zwaber and I and our consultant making the recommendation to the commission that we would do a building addition, just for the simple fact that I'm really comfortable with financially how that would position us going into the future. There are a lot of projects that we want to do going into the future other than having utilities support a huge building addition or a new building addition. We really feel that this location serves our needs very well, and we love this location. It's central to town, so to speak. We don't have to cross any major highways really for the majority of our work. And so ultimately, we recommended to the commission that that we do a building addition at the estimated cost of about $3 million. And at the January 25th commission meeting, the commission approved to proceed with doing a building addition and to hire SEH to help us with laying out plan specifications and ultimately bidding documents to go out for a building addition yet this spring. I really just wanted to present this to the council so that you're aware of what the commission's been working on and answer any questions. There'll be some items that Ken Onich has been helping me a lot with. We will need a variance here in regards to building a little closer to the road. It really won't encroach any further than what our fenced area is there now, but nonetheless, we will need a variance to do so. And the lot is broke up a little bit. We'll combine this lot as to one lot. And so Ken's been helping me with that, and that will come back to the council for your approval. One other item that could come back to the council for approval is if we were to decide that we wanted to finance part of it. Patty and I and the commission and our consultants we've been kind of looking at what we want to do in regards to the financing of the building. We have some options available. We do have some cash reserves that we've been earmarking for this type of addition, both in the electric and the water department. And so those details will be forthcoming and ultimately presented to the council as well. So I just wanted to bring this forth and then answer any questions that the council may have.
I have one question, Bruce. On your drawing, is that going to be all paved parking then?
Yeah, the lot is currently all paved, Dwayne, except for them parking stalls back there. That is the only area that is not currently paved. So.
Okay, and that would be a drive around then?
Correct. Yeah, we'd have access into two spots into the building as drive-through, one being right here and the other one that they could come through this door here and then ultimately drive through if those stalls were open. So
okay.
It lays out pretty nice. It does utilize that lot in its entirety, no doubt about it. But we really feel it'll still serve our needs well into the future and at a cost that I think is desirable to the operation here.
Bruce, how many people use that?
Hang on. Go ahead, Sean. That's who I heard first.
Bruce, how many people, employees actually will utilize that building? Because some of your staff is still going to be at Main Street, right?
Yeah, right now, Sean, I only have supervisory staff really here at Main Street, and then a couple of and power plant operations people. So there'll be currently about 10 people that will occupy the water and electric distribution staff that will be function out of that building.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Rick.
Yeah, I was just wondering, you don't need no action or nothing tonight?
I'm sorry, Rick, can you say it one more time?
Do you need any action tonight?
No, this is just information. I'll need action from the council when it comes to Ken helping me with the variance and then possibly financing should we decide to bond with one of the city's projects.
Okay. Any other questions for Bruce? All right. We're on to number 6 then, the consent agenda. I would take a motion to approve that consent agenda.
I'd like to pull one thing out of there just to discuss real quick.
Okay, go ahead.
I just had a question on the liquor license application, Mike. Are they going to pay the full? I know that we're going to cut that liquor license in half for the existing bars that are there. Will this entity, now that they really didn't have any COVID side effects like the other businesses and were forced to close, are they going to pay the full liquor license or will they just pay half a liquor license like the other ones?
No, when you took the action that you did earlier in January, is you set the upcoming fee for the intoxicating liquor license, you reduce that by 50%, so they would pay the lower fee.
Do we have to do that with this individual, or could we just restate that it was people that actually incurred a financial loss that were already here?
Well, that wasn't the action that you took.
I understand.
You took an action to set that fee at half of the 2,700 or 1,350. We don't necessarily get to pick and choose all the circumstances as far as who that may or may not be applicable to. And Scott might indicate that by doing that is you might be, and I hate to speak out of turn because I'm not the attorney, but where you're arbitrarily picking and choosing who that fee is or isn't applicable to versus the fee for that particular license is X. And so as it stands right now, in her application and our bringing it to the process is we indicated early on it was 2,700, but when you took the action to reduce the fee for intoxicating liquor, it dropped it to 1,350, and that's what she has paid and made her application on.
Okay. And then the next question, just to piggyback, it's not really part of the consent agenda. Maybe I should wait till the miscellaneous portion, but I did want to just bring up that when we made that action to reduce those fees for the liquor license holders, I was under the assumption that, Strike Force Bowl that doesn't have a full intoxicating liquor, or the KC Hall, that their fees would also be halved. The Oriole baseball team, I just thought we were doing it for everybody that had some style of liquor license, not just the full liquor license. Am I mistaken at that, or maybe the other council?
You did not. If I can answer that, Mayor, is that you and the council did not take action on all of the various liquor licenses. You talked about what was there and only specifically took action on the intoxicating liquor license. And with the materials we provided to you, we talked about that and you had debate, but only specifically took the action on the intoxicating liquor license.
Okay, well, then I'll just let the council know that I've been approached by the Oriole baseball team and Strike Force Bowl, and I can only make an assumption that PC Hall and the Legion would also want to benefit from. They really put up with the same type of things that the full liquor license people did, in the sense that they were closed down. And I'd like to make, or at least get some feedback from council. And it would be my suggestion that we also extend that to the lesser, anybody that had any type of liquor license, and just reduce that fee by half like we did for the full service bars and restaurants.
Okay, so what we'll do is we can approve the agenda and then we can come back to that.
Okay, thank you, Mayor.
So let's go and approve the agenda. I would take a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved. Second.
Okay.
Rick
made the motion and Sean seconded it.
That's correct.
Yep. And any other discussion on the consent agenda? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Bruce.
Oh.
Bruce.
Aye.
Sean.
Aye.
Rick.
Aye.
Maggie.
Aye.
And Jerick votes aye. Okay. Now we're to miscellaneous.
Mayor, if I could point out, if you remember, we had that discussion in general, and we talked about that as to whether that was only specific to that one or whether you were intending to do others, and you only did take that action for the intoxicating liquor. So it wasn't as if there wasn't that discussion in general, and that we pointed out the various types of licenses were there and what the financial impact was if you did a 50% reduction on that item. And so you had not taken action on any of the others.
Correct. You're correct. So Sean brought up a point. Is there any other, does anybody want to talk to that? I don't hear anything, so.
I don't either, but I'll make a motion that we extend that courtesy to the other establishments that have liquor license to have their liquor license charged at the 50% rate like we did the full scale liquor bars and restaurants. They were hurt just as badly as anybody else. And we're talking a lot less money too, because I think Strikeforce has a $400 setup license. And beer and wine, I think it's a lot less than that. So we're talking a couple $100 for each one of those businesses. And as I said, I've been approached by both the Orioles and Strikeforce Bowl that would like to be included in that.
I'll second that, Sean.
Thank
Okay,
you, Rick.
there's a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion?
The only caveat I would ask that you do is unless it is unable to be discounted because of state statute. Some of them are set in state statute on what we can charge for them.
Okay, Mike, do you have any information on that I could bring back to the Orioles, or that they might not be able to be included due to state statute?
They're not one of them. It's the ones that I think are, Jim, if I'm thinking correctly, the consumption and display.
Yeah, they have a $300 fee that comes directly from the state.
Okay. And that's all, there's nothing from the city?
Any state fees.
So, well, that would be Strikeforce, Knights of Columbus, and that would be it. Well, the depot has that also.
So any of those that would have that license, we would not be able to adjust.
Is there a city portion of that? I understand we can't adjust the state portion, but is there a city?
That is the city cost, and that's dictated by the state for those particular licenses.
It is, okay. And we know that for a fact, so I can go back and report to them that unfortunately we cannot do that as a city.
Well, we wouldn't tell you that unless it was true.
No, that's what you're saying though, right? So there is no other portion.
We can pull out the state statute and hand it to you so you can deliver it if that's what's necessary to show what the cost of that license is.
Right. I think both those entities will believe me if I go in and see them. I don't need a sheet. What I'm asking though is that is the only other fees. Is there any fees that we could deduct at the 50% rate for those businesses that the city charges them? Or is it just state only charge?
Well, I think what your motion is to do 50% on any of the license fees that we control.
Yes.
Is what you're taking an action on. And so that's what we would go forward to attempt to reduce. But if it's regulated and set by the state, there's no choice but to leave it at that fixed amount.
Okay, I understand that. That explains it a little better. Thank you.
Okay, Rick, did you hear that?
Yes, I did.
Okay, you're okay with that?
Yep.
Any other discussion from the council?
Yes, I have some questions. I guess I'm a little surprised that, did they just come to you to this today, Sean, or did you know about this earlier, or?
No, this was just in the last week. They read it in the paper that there was going to be a reduction, or heard it around town, or I don't know where they heard it, but they just wanted to know why they weren't included. And I said, I thought they were. And then that's how it started. But I ran into both the Orioles and Strikeforce.
Okay. I guess I'm a little confused by the discussion so far, but it'd be nice to have a heads up from if we could funnel some of this stuff through Mike so he could let us know ahead of time some of these issues that people are bringing forward, so we have an idea of what might be talked about at the meeting, because I'm kind of caught off guard here. I don't really have my sheet from earlier, what we're actually talking about, but maybe you could state the motion and what fees we're talking about exactly.
Any liquor fee that those establishments that weren't included in the first round, that their fees would be reduced at the same proportionate 50% that we did the full service bars and restaurants.
So on and off sale?
It's just on sale, I think, is the only fee. Is there an off premise or
There's off sale fees to be able to sell liquor off site.
but we didn't address that the first time around, right? It was only on premise.
We
the
did.
on-premise-
We felt that those businesses were not hurt because the liquor stores were getting even more business because the drinking establishments were closed.
That's correct. I do remember that. So yes, this would be just on premise portion of their fees, if not regulated by the state.
I don't have that chart in front of me, Mike, but what was the definition that would include these 5 or 6 people that you referred to? What was that under?
I don't have that sheet in front of me either. And the fees that we have are all spelled out in the annual, the resolution that you took action on in January as well. And if you remember, we kind of asked this whole overview question because we were getting ready to send out all of the liquor license applications, and we were trying to make sure that was it just the on sale intoxicating liquor, and that was the only one you took action on, but we had general discussion about the others, and you hadn't chosen to want to do that at that time. So I don't have any materials in front of me, so I'm kind of going off. Jim may have it. I don't have it in front of me. That what you're asking is any other remaining liquor fees that the city charges for, assuming it isn't on sale and assuming that it's none that are governed by the state statute, is what you're really asking for action on.
Can we table this to get the information so we put it to bed the next time?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say too. Sean, let's back it off so that it's not a fail. I'll rescind my second.
That's fine. I'm more than happy to wait, but I would like it on the next council meeting if we could.
I agree.
Fine.
Thank you. I'd appreciate that.
Thank you.
Are there any other anticipated adjustments or revisions, or only what's been talked about at this time?
Are you asking me, Mike? Those are the only 2 people I've talked to.
I'm asking in general to the council, so that as we go back and attempt to put it together, is that the scope of what we're looking at, or is there anything else that's anticipated?
Nothing from me. I didn't anticipate this request, so.
I guess I'd want to see it for all, or
We have the information, we can certainly provide it. That's not difficulty, but it also would involve an inaction, and that if you're going to do that, you probably need to amend, Ken, the resolution on our city fees and charges is really what would have to go on. And the question is this just for the upcoming year for liquor licenses covering April 1 through March 31st of 2022, and that this is really a one-time action from your perspective?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's right. It is just a one-time.
Yep.
That was my understanding.
yes.
That's how it was noted on the fee schedule for the liquor license, so.
Okay. Thanks, Mike. Any other miscellaneous? Does anybody else have anything?
No, I'll tell you guys, I apologize. I thought I had everything set, but the lighting is messed up. So next time my forehead will be lit up.
Okay. Bruce, I saw your hand go up.
I was just going to comment, thanks for providing the golf course financial statement. I know it's a preliminary, but I think it does show that it appears that we had a positive cash flow, even though expenses were over income. So it was good to see. And my understanding of the numbers is there's no need for any kind of a line of credit or us to talk about that this year. That's the only comment I had.
Maggie, anything?
No, I don't have anything for this evening.
Bruce, Ken, Jim, Matt,
I don't have any.
Barb, I'm not going to be there till Wednesday morning. I have to take my mom in for surgery tomorrow.
Sounds good.
Okay, all right.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, with that, I would take a motion to adjourn.
Mayor, hold up. Whoa. Mayor, I've got one item that,
Wait.
as we're trying to put together the council retreat, one of the other things we've been working on, and it, initially started because of some challenges within the electric department, and that has to deal with compensation, dealing with the retention and the recruitment of journeyman employees and apprentices as it relates to our competition with our adjoining service co-ops. And or in addition to that is that when we last took a look at the issue, and this has to deal with the compensation plan and dealing with pay equity and comparable worth, that, when you go to take a look at that, you can't just do that really for one department. You have to look at the whole comprehensive organization. And the last time, the city dealt with this was back in 2014. I think Sean is the only remaining elected official that was involved in that at that time. It would have been him and former mayor, now Nikolai, but that was in 2014. And the discussion at that time was to try to make sure that we took a look at this whole compensation plan and program as we look at it, and with the transition that we're going through in a number of departments, and that we're likely to see in the coming months with department heads as well, is trying to make sure that we're in a marketable position, that we're competitive and are going to be able to recruit in that arena. And so we've been working on it. It's been very challenging in trying to put it together. We've been working with Leah Davis. If you remember, she was the lady that helped the council and the staff with the personnel policy way back in March of last year, that we've been trying to work with her. It's been a huge challenge because there is such an economic difference between what we're able to offer as part of the compensation plan as it relates to the, like I said, the competition. And so we're going to need to, when we take a look at putting together the council retreat, whether we do it separately or as part of it, we're going to need to spend the time, because back when we did this in 2014, the council had said we'd like to see this in 5 to 7 years. Well, time flies, and we're 7 years down the road from when we last looked at this in 2014. And then the time before that, Dwayne, I believe you were on the council in 2007. There was an update to the compensation plan. So it's not something we do every year. Excuse me. And I just want to make sure before I end up transitioning out of the organization at some point that we've taken a look at and updated this. It also comes into play as we try to deal with, the competition and the settlement with our police union contracts. So I don't have anything to give you tonight, but we've been working on it. And I believe there's a few final adjustments that we need to develop some final cost estimates. But we'll need to schedule a session with the council to kind of go through that to number one, go through a bit of an education because a number of you have never been through this. And we're hoping that Leah will be able to do as good a job as she did when we adopted the personnel policy back last March. So I'm trying to give you that as a one of the items and elements I'm going to have to try to find a way to schedule time. We're working with the department heads trying to put together kind of a list of updates as to things that have been accomplished and what are the items on the horizon in the next 18 months to 24 months that we need to be bringing to you as we try to put this workshop together. So we don't have it completely ready to go, but that's one of the topics that I need to make sure that I get taken care of with you. And I know, Sean, that that was one of your most favorite times when we went through that discussion. I say that tongue in cheek.
Yeah, I know.
And we also will need to involve inviting, as we did the last time, we invited in the utility commission because they are a separate operation. But the reason that it's fairly critical is I've been working with Bruce and Patty and trying to take a look at this and what it means and where we can go is simple bottom line. And I don't mean to scare you when I say this, but as we deal with being able to employ journeyman linemen and apprentice linemen is that there's a requirement that we have so many journeyman linemen. And if we're unable to be able to pay a competitive wage that allows us to retain or recruit people to those positions, and we get down to the point that we don't have enough, effectively, we will be unable to operate the electric utility. And I know that maybe that comes across somewhat scary, but as I've worked with Bruce to try to understand the challenges that he's up against in that competitive arena, it's very simply that with what we're able to offer versus what some of the competitors can do around us, that employees can live here and work for one of them and be able to travel 20 miles or something and be at a competitively distinct advantage in working for the competitors and the other co-ops. And so it does come down to, just absolutely how far can we go and what can we do? But the challenge is we have to have so many of those specific journeyman linemen. We can't operate the whole department with a bunch of apprentice linemen. And if we don't have the required numbers, we functionally can't operate the utility. And so therein lies part of the challenge that we've been working with and trying to figure out solutions and options. And so, we've brought in and trying to work with Leah, and part of bringing her in versus formally working with what was Springstead or now Baker Tilly is that the timing last year, we weren't getting the work product we were looking for. And so we switched to work with Leah, which ended up changing the job evaluation system that we used. And so we ended up having to kind of look at repointing positions and going through all that. So we're going to need the better part of a full evening and maybe multiple meetings to kind of go through this. But I just wanted to kind of put you on notice that I'm going to be looking at trying to get that scheduled with you so that we can get that pulled together and looked at so that you're able to effectively decide where you think we want to go with that. It may not have to be done all in one night, but I feel it's my responsibility that I make sure you at least have the review of all of the information, assess the situation, and that we know what we have to do in that arena. And it does, as Sean will recall from the last time, there's a lot of information when it comes to pay equity and comparable worth, internal, external equities, who are our comparability group. There's a lot of factors that go into that process. And so we want to make sure that we've got ample time to kind of walk you through what those requirements are, what we're up against, and what we're really trying to look at doing and updating here in the long term.
Okay.
So nothing you need to do tonight.
I guess I'm wondering what we're thinking we might do as far as are we going to have a planning meeting, or is this going to be in with the planning meeting, or should we have a planning meeting as part of our regular meeting, or just how is this going to dovetail now that we're into February already?
Well, in trying to take a look at that, you know, I've been trying to decide whether this is something we can do on our own, whether we want any kind of outside facilitator in the process, but working with the staff trying to pull together the updated information for that. No, I would not normally expect that we would do this on a regular council meeting night, is that it likely would require a special meeting in and of itself. This whole compensation issue itself could take up time on its own and wouldn't be something that I would necessarily want to do in that planning or goal setting meeting with the council. And so we're still trying to work on those details as to the timing of what's going to work. And if you remember when we talked about it, is that we were hoping that it was going to be able to be put together for either late February or early March is what the timing was.
For which one?
For the goal setting, the planning meeting for the council. What I'm describing is a totally separate standalone item, but also, you know, really is kind of part of those items, but is sufficiently debatable and one that was going to require a certain amount of education outside of trying to do it alone. It in and of itself will take up a whole evening, you know, depending on the time that we give it.
For the planning meeting, would it be proper for us to submit thoughts that we might want to have included in it to you, Mike, or how do we gather the agenda for a planning meeting?
Well, generally what we've typically done in the past is we've asked all of the departments to provide their best information and update of pending or known issues looking at the next 18 to 24 months. And the council has kind of looked at that. If the council has a list of items that you want included that are kind of coming from the council, we certainly can put that on and include that as part of those materials.
Yeah, what I think, had a workshop.
Yeah, we are talking about a separate independent workshop versus a regular first and third council meetings.
So do we want to schedule one in or what?
No, just wait. That's what we're talking about, but Bruce, you had another question?
Well, I was just going to comment. Sometimes that's what I fight with. Sometimes I would love to send out emails to all the other council members so we can kind of give each other information, but I know that's not legal. So sometimes we need to have someone act as the conduit or run things through the city administrator and then have them put it out. And this would be kind of an example, I would think, but.
What you could do is that, albeit it's probably different than most, is that if every elected official had a list of their items or concerns or issues, you know, that could be formatted and submitted to my office, and we could include that in the packet of materials as it came in from those elected officials, along with the staff's materials. And so you're going to be able to see kind of both elements there, and ultimately trying to sift through or winnow through or understand what all of that information looks like from both staff and or council. The council's then going to have to create and establish priorities and you know, direction looking at the next 18 to 24 months.
Well, if it's appropriate, I wouldn't mind jotting some things down and sending it to you for that purpose. And so it's a productive meeting. I would encourage everyone to do that. Yep. So we might have all the same issues. I don't know, but.
I think that's a good idea. Is that okay with you, Mike?
If that's what the council desires, that's what we can try to put together.
I think that that would be good. Okay.
Mike, where are we on in-person meetings? You guys were going to talk about it as a staff last time.
We did, and Ken, you want to kind of update the list of everything that we were looking at and trying to finalize to be able to bring back that it wasn't as if we sat on our thumbs and didn't do anything, that you know, we took a look at the potential layout, you know, within the confines. Ken, I don't know, do you have a picture that you can pull up from
Yep, hold on here. Yeah, so myself and Chad Lunder, our building official, we spaced out the 6-foot spacing. All the council room could lay out. We can go to a better picture here. So you can fit 3 council members up at the council dais, and then 2 council people have to be off to the side. We can fit 2 to 4 staff in the room at one time at most, and then 10 individuals, but let me go to a different picture here. That includes pushing people well over to the side wall. Nobody would have a real good view of the projector overhead. It's kind of limiting. The other difficulty is where to put the podium, because you got to keep that 6 feet from people, and then where to put the camera to adequately capture the view of the screen, the council and staff and people speaking. It's just not a great setup for any of that.
Couldn't we have staff just come in one at a time, group the presentations that they have to do? Let's say it's Mike sitting there and Barb, because she's taking the minutes, and then you come in, and then when you go over the 3 items that you have, and then maybe Jim comes in and goes over his 2 items, and then Matt comes in and goes over his 2 items, as opposed to having you all there during the same meeting.
Yep.
That would probably give us the extra room.
That's been part of the discussion, but it's also taking a look at is how many people do we really want to allow in that environment? It's a self-enclosed area. The assumption is that people are also going to have to be masked to be in there. I have people that are concerned about coming into that area, you know, based on the number of people that would be allowed into that room. And so then it's trying to take a look at, as Ken just said, how do we set up appropriate presentation capabilities, and what is the viewing opportunity? Do we continue any external with our go-to meeting, and how do we make that work with that system, with what you're seeing in front of you? So from a logistics standpoint, we're trying to figure out how that works. And so we don't necessarily tonight have a final answer to recommend, but you can see kind of what we're wrestling with and figuring out how to put it together.
Well, I'm fine with that layout, but I think 4 of the 5 wanted to get, of the council members wanted to get back in person. I think that was the direction that was given the last time, but if you need to spend more time on it, trying to figure it out.
Well, I think when we bring it back, and if it's going to be possible to bring back on the 16th, it probably would be with the list of recommendations that are imposed or agreed to be able to hold it and to conduct this meeting now back in person. So we'd have that in front of you to consider, so that we've got a basis in which to operate going forward if that's what we're going to do.
Okay.
Okay.
But fundamentally, from the perspective of allowing any external participation, you know, the question is, are you still wanting us to try to continue to do go-to meeting, or are we discontinuing that? And anybody that's going to come has to come to the meeting. You know, therein lies a bit of the challenge. And as you can see with the separation that's there, it's very difficult to be able to see the screen over on the far left there. Ken, I don't know if you have a picture. Yeah, there you go. You can see it's not convenient for everybody that might be in the audience. As you look at council members, you know, we're going to have to flip a coin to see who doesn't sit up at the council dais versus who's got to sit down on the floor and kind of off the dais. And, you know, we can have recommendations, but, you know, ultimately you may have to flip coins to decide who sits down there in going through that process. And, you know, the difficulty is trying to merge on any of the present capabilities that you're seeing that we do on screen right now. How do we do any of that on the screen versus anybody being able to watch now on the go-to meeting situation? So that's kind of what we're struggling with, trying to figure out how to put the technology together. And if you remember, Ken had laid out quite an overview of where he thinks we need to go to be able to mix the two together, because we're not, quite frankly, set up to accommodate that at this time.
Well, the last couple of meetings, well, let's just use tonight, for example. We had, what, 2 other people that weren't city staff or council members? So, I mean, I'll, you guys know where I stand. I'll listen to the rest of the council.
Let's wait until the 16th until we get back recommendation from Mike and his department heads.
Okay, that's fair.
I would like to wait too. I mean, we don't know what's going on with this virus, whether it's mutating or whatever. Last month in January, it was the biggest numbers that they ever had. So I don't know. Why can't we just put this off for a month or so before we decide?
I guess I want to get back as soon as we can, but safely, you know, if it's not going to be safe, you know.
Yeah, I'm not, you know, I'm not saying it shouldn't be safe. I'm just saying there seems to be me personally, it looks like there's plenty of room there, and given my 10+ years of experience and knowing that there's been maybe 2 or 3 meetings where there's been more than 5 people at it, is enough for me. But
yeah.
Well, let me ask the question then, if I can, up front, frankly, is that if we go back to that, are you saying we would discontinue the go-to meetings?
I would say yes. We don't. Why wouldn't we? We could record them and put them on YouTube like we always have, or the city website.
That's what I thought we would do. I mean, one or the other. Not a hybrid.
Okay, thank you.
I would ask when you come back, if you could give us an indication if there's going to be any problems with employees or staff or department heads attending meetings, or if you mentioned that.
Well, there is, you know, a difference, and I'm not going to call anybody out to name, and even including myself, as you take a look at it, is that, you know, a number of us have been quite faithful and diligent in not putting ourselves in positions of going out and participating in events or activities where we've been exposed to different things. And so we're quite cognizant of wanting to protect that so that we don't encounter or incur COVID if possible. And so we will be reviewing that, and as part of those recommendations, probably we'll have thoughts on dealing with that. And there are some, quite frankly, that would probably prefer not to be in that room at all. And so if you discontinue the go-to meetings, that makes it awful tough to figure out how to accommodate that from a staff perspective. And so,
I'm listening.
therein lies part of the challenge in the process.
Gotcha.
And even if you have one person come in at a time, you're still walking into an environment that, we all know that, we have an aged, mechanical cooling, Ken, Bruce, that, our system is, very aged, and I can't say is, in tip-top shape. We did the air test, Ken, right? And so we don't have any issues from an air handling standpoint, but whether it turns it over to the degree that it needs to in that environment, depending on how many people we have in the room or whatnot, I don't have a perfect answer, but that's part of what we're trying to look at in this whole picture of trying to accommodate moving and getting back together in this environment. And I know there are those that have had COVID and they don't maybe have to worry anymore, but I'll use myself personally. I've not had it. I just soon would do everything in my powers to ensure that I don't get it. And, as we come back and try to meet in person, there are those risks that come with doing that. And how far do we go and what's expected of us in that process? That's part of our internal debate that we're having.
Aren't you all back in the office right now?
We are, but if we leave our direct office, everybody is masked up as they go anywhere other than right at their immediate desk, is the part of the rules and the recommendations that we had developed under our COVID policy.
Well, and I don't think anybody on the council would have a problem being masked up if we were in that same room and it's using the same heating and venting and cooling that you are right upstairs in the council chambers.
So Sean, you're suggesting that we have the city council meetings with masks on?
That
You have to.
We would have to.
I don't think that you would probably get some of the staff to return if that wasn't the case. Now, whether you choose to accept those recommendations ultimately will be your choice, but that's part of the debate and the consternation about being able to provide you with immediate answer without making sure that we've got the overall listing of all of the concerns and the issues noted as to what we think ought to happen if we do in fact return.
I hear that. Okay. Well, we'll just
have that so that we have it on the 16th. The challenge we're going to have that Mayor Jerk and I are expected to be, as you can see on the agenda for the 16th, is there's a 8 o'clock Fire Relief Association annual meeting at the fire department that he and I need to be able to attend. So we'll see how many of these things we can fit and see if we can get that done within that time frame, because we'll have to leave to attend that meeting.
How many people will be at that meeting, Mike?
There could be about 35 people. And what's intended, as I've had conversation with the fire chief, is the only way that I would recommend that he even be entitled to hold that is that they would clear out all of the trucks and there would be sufficient spacing out in the fire apparatus area, that this not be held within their normal meeting area because there wouldn't be able to be adequate separation within that meeting room to do that. And they are required to hold this annual meeting. And so I indicated to Fire Chief Rinda that the only way that he could do it would be to make sure that there's proper ventilation occurring, which I think he can handle, and that there's sufficient separation, and that everybody be masked up for that meeting.
Have all our fire and police been vaccinated now?
I'll let Jim answer that.
This week we get our second round, so we will be completed on the 3rd. And about 66% of the fire department got vaccinated and 70% of the police department took part
Thank
in
you.
it. So
There are those that have chosen not to get shots. Which is their prerogative. Otherwise, that's all I have, Mayor.
Okay, I didn't mean to cut you off earlier, Mike. Don't be mad at me. Okay, so with that, I would take a motion to adjourn if there's no other business.
So
Move
moved.
to adjourn.
There's been a motion, a second. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Mr.
Motion
Mayor,
carried.
good luck
Yes.
tomorrow with your mom.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
You guys have a good night.
Yep.
Have a good night. See you later.
Good night.
Bye-bye.